Like, I've been able to go out and visit, like, very infrequently some other programs and just drop in. People call me and say it's kind of a drum major emergency.
Hello, and welcome to episode 41 of the BandWagon podcast for the week of December 2nd, 2024. On this edition of the program, news and notes from the band world, including a pair of international band stories, a little recognition of Senior Day, a story of drum major miscommunication, and a conversation about putting past experience to good use. I'm your host, Rob Hammerton. Hello, dear listener. More consistent smiles in this week's episode than last week's, I promise. And not just in the episode artwork, either. So, put those flip folders and lyres someplace where you'll be able to find them again for Memorial Day, and away we go. Let's play the first strain. In this episode's first strain, news and notes from the band world. Dateline, Riga, Latvia. Credit to the writing of Airman First Class Eve Doherty of the U.S. Air Force's 86th Airlift Wing, writing in the U.S. Defense Department's online publication Defense Visual Information Distribution Service. On November 18th, the U.S. Air Forces in Europe and Air Forces Africa Band formed a combined marching band with the Latvian National Guard Orchestra to support the Latvian Independence Day Parade for the first time in U.S. Air Force history. The combined band marched an approximately 2-kilometer parade route through the streets of Riga. 13 Allied nations total participated in the parade, which featured formations, heavy artillery, and aircraft flyovers. In preparation for the parade, the bands rehearsed together for 3 days to synchronize their movements, share marching techniques, and coordinate their performance. U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Rafael Toro Quinones, the Air Force Band's commander, said, quote, "Through this historic collaboration, we are celebrating Latvian independence and reaffirming the commitment of NATO allies to protect and promote our shared values." To further foster U.S. and Latvian connections, the Air Force bands engaged with communities by performing for Latvian youth at local schools. Also, band members appeared live in a program on the TV3 Play Latvia news station, which included an interview with the band's commander and a brief musical performance. Dateline, Belfast, Northern Ireland. Credit to the reporting and writing of Sophia Spiegel for the online publication BU Today. Over the Thanksgiving weekend, the Boston University men's hockey team and the BU Pep Band brought the energy and tradition of American college sports to Northern Ireland as the Terriers competed in the Friendship 4 tournament, the only NCAA Division I ice hockey tournament held outside North America. This was BU's first Friendship 4 appearance since 2018. For many players and band members, the trip was their first experience traveling abroad. Founded in 2015, the Friendship 4 celebrates the official sister city relationship between Boston and Belfast, blending elite hockey with cultural and community engagement. This year's other participating teams included Merrimack College, Harvard University, and Notre Dame. It was the first overseas trip for the BU Pep Band. BU head hockey coach Jay Pandolfo said of the band, quote, "There's such a big part of the history and tradition of BU hockey. You just feel a little more at home when the BU band is around." Based on auditions and availability, 40 band members were selected to go on the trip. Funding for the trip was supported through BU Athletics, the College of Fine Arts School of Music, and a separate fundraiser. BU band director Aaron Goldberg said, quote, "This was probably the most successful giving campaign we've had for the band. There was a ton of excitement about the trip, and people were happy to chip in." The band's schedule included game day performances, a parade in Carrickfergus, a large town near Belfast, and a concert at the Amphitheater Wellness Center organized by the United States Consulate. Their set list featured BU's fight song and fan favorites including Shippin' Up to Boston. And that's news and notes from the band world for this week. If you have a news item you think should be included in this segment, send me a link via email to heybandwagon@yahoo.com. Now we'll pause for just a moment, and on the other side of that, a second strain that is far less frowny than last week's. Hope you'll stay with me. Okay, let's pick it up at the second strain. In this week's second strain, with the exception of the college bands that will accompany their school's successful football teams to the various bowl games or to the various rounds of what used to be called Division I AA, Division II, and Division III football playoffs, we've reached the end of the fall marching season. Even the popsicles doubling as Massachusetts high school band members have thawed out from their traditional Thanksgiving morning football game duties by now. And now, the next round of high school and college seniors have marched their last field show. As it happens, this particular early December, the 2024 edition, marks 10 years since I got to hang out for a season, and then another couple of them, with a little college band that relatively few people may have heard of, but which proved that even without national exposure, band is band is band, and it's grand. 10 years ago, plus about a week and a half, I wrote a piece, for the ancient blog called Editorial License, which I used to contribute to almost at the same rate that these podcast episodes leap out into the world. That little essay will serve well, I think, as your introduction to my time with the good people of the Central Connecticut State University Blue Devil Marching Band. The piece was written a few days after the last home game of CCSU's 2014 football season, and here it is, very lightly edited. It was entitled, Odd Ducks Wearing Feathers on Our Heads. He's going to write about band again. Well, if you read this blog at all, you kind of know that's a large part of where I live. When I was a college student, it really was where I lived, to the point where one of the professors in the department from which I earned my actual degree noted that we knew you were majoring in band. So at this time of the year, if I should happen to go to a college football game or watch one on the TV, and the sports broadcast outlet stoops to showing camera angles of the band, or if I log on to my social media feed and read the posts of some college band associated folks with whom I've relatively recently been connected, I note that the activity does mean a lot to the people inside it. Even if, in spite of the appearance of movies like Drumline, most of the world still thinks it's an activity full of odd ducks wearing feathers on their heads. Which actually it is, but in a good way. This weekend, which was the weekend before Thanksgiving 2024, everybody, and for some higher profile groups, thanks to the successful football programs to which they're attached, next weekend, or sometime in December or January, will mark the last time some of their members will ever don those often bizarre uniforms, the last time they will ever play musical instruments that were never designed to be played in the middle of a polar vortex, and the last time they will ever sing songs and chant chants and commit relatively innocent hijinks. All the while rooting for groups of people who wear often bizarre uniforms, including short pants that were never designed to be worn in the middle of a polar vortex, grunting grunts and slamming into other people wearing inexplicable short pants, chasing after a ball that isn't even round. For this reason, tears will be shed late this afternoon in a great many football stadiums across the nation. For one in particular that I've recently gotten to know, that weekend was a week ago. This fall, it's fall of 2014, for the first time in a good long while, I was attached on a weekly basis to a college marching band. In this case, it was as an instructional assistant with a band of about 65 musicians. During the typically intense preseason camp, I ran music sectional rehearsals, assisted with the teaching of field drill, moved amplification systems, helped with the fetching of sandwich materials for post-rehearsal snacks. If it needed doing, I helped do it. During band camp sectionals, I had my face figuratively torn off by a brass section whose numbers to quality sound ratio was off the charts. And during other band camp sectionals, I, a former marching saxophonist, returned to the world of marching woodwinds are people too, although in this band, the woodwind players saw the front sideline an awful lot more than those in the outsized bands tend to be able to do. At rehearsals and football games and high school shows, I helped move the pit. Grunt. I got to hear their director, the great Dr. Lauren Reynolds, describe for high school exhibition audiences that her band's traditional closing song is a reminder that band is a place where everyone can feel like they have somewhere to call home. I got to drive the equipment truck, which didn't break down once. My literal running around in the hot sun in t-shirts and shorts, and then in the increasingly chilly late afternoon air as the semester progressed and the daylight savings time change loomed ever nearer, it helped to keep me from remembering that I was a good 30 years older than half the kids in the band. Hustle out there, Rob. But it helped me to remember, as if I really needed help to remember, that college bands are full of truly fine and decent people. It's almost as if they know that the world in general thinks the marching band activity is bizarre and worthy of mockery, gentle or not, and it just makes them even tighter with their colleagues. If we don't support each other, who the hell is going to? These Central Connecticut State Band folks worked hard. Not just on the field, where the music and drill forced them to figuratively fly around the field. Fast notes, fast feet, and you can't hide or dog it and still survive halftime. But off the field as well. In smaller bands, a larger percentage of the band roster is called upon to be the student leadership. Taking individual ownership of the ensemble is a lot more likely, not that most of the membership wouldn't take it anyway, for all but the folks who are in marching band to satisfy a music major requirement, and even for many of them, it's their choice to be there. They choose to sweat in the sun, stand in the rain, freeze in the cold, and perform in a manner that frankly was unimaginable to musicians of 300 years ago. One reason I was hanging out with this particular band was that a summer teaching colleague of mine was the director. One enjoys being with and helping friends. Another reason I was rather deeply involved from the get-go, though, was that my friend the director was going to deliver a baby sometime mid-season, and one of the things one cannot do while having a baby is direct a college band. I certainly think it's unwise to try, because neither of one's babies will get the attention it deserves. My schedule made it possible for me to help out in this way, to assume one of the more public versions of substitute teaching that I can think of, so happily I did so. It had been nearly a decade since the last time I had been in front of a college band on a regular basis in any form, and it was good to get back into that game. Not because I desperately needed to be seen stepping to the home side bleachers railing and conducting the pregame show, although that was part of the gig. Not because I desperately needed to walk alongside the band during a Veterans Day parade and say thank you to cheering spectators on behalf of the performers, although I did that too. I'm one of those weird people who actually likes parades. I always have been. Don't judge. And it was good to get back into that game, not because I desperately needed to ask a group of college students, "How are your feet?" Although in this particular band, that was how rehearsals ended. And I only screwed up my part of that feet together, stomach in, etc., chance once. One time! Who's got the least articulate pretend director anywhere? Y'all do. Sorry. I'm more used to giving those answers than asking those questions. But, as I rediscovered, starred thought. Surround yourself with good people. Makes you look better. When you hang out with people who are enjoying possibly the last moments in their lives during which they are able, nay, encouraged, to take part in organized silliness, you experience life the way it really ought to be lived. Vicariously, perhaps, but all the same, you do. In a way, I was cheating. My college band senior day happened in very, very late October 1987, and at the time I had no idea that it wasn't going to be my last chance to leap up in the air and pump my fists when my team intercepted a pass, to gyrate weirdly to the strains of Hey Baby, to stand out in miserable weather for 3 hours and shout, "Harder rain! Whoa!" Tears will be shed this weekend by college band kids, and those tears will be a curious and enviable mix of disappointment that their college marching careers are over, yes, but also of love for the activity they threw themselves into, and even more for the people with whom they shared it, for a year or 4 or more. For many of them, this really will be the last time they get to experience this in just this way. Some will become band directors themselves, but even that will be just a version of the experience. And, of course, there will be alumni band experiences to look forward to, which will be close but not quite the same. They'll be near the playing of Twist and Shout, and the band cheers, and the mascot kidnapping. Have I said too much? But they'll still only be looking over at the kids who are now actually in those beloved, bizarre uniforms. But at the very least, the memories will stick, memories of senior day and of everything that came before, and the knowledge that we were part of something insane and incredible, and nobody takes that away from us. For my colleagues in the UMass Fall 1987 senior group, perhaps all we have to do is hum Still Crazy after all these years for that senior day to come readily to mind. And hot on the heels of that, all we have to do is hum Silverado or Ichano or Al's Rag or Crown Imperial or Oh, George Parks. Yeah, I've said too much. So I consider myself very fortunate indeed to have had the opportunity to be near enough to another, more recent senior group, that of the Central Connecticut State University Band, members of which may instead hum Skyfall or Blue Skies or Dancing in the Dark or Runaway Baby, or a tune that I have no idea about because I wasn't on that bus. Because I do have some idea of what that feels like. Because I was an odd duck, wearing feathers on my head. More stories of my days with the Central Connecticut Band in future episodes, I promise. But now, next up is a delightful conversation with a delightful person. This is BandWagon. Okay, let's modulate and get into the trio section. This week in the trio section, see, this is the thing about social media. You can sort of, nominally, in a sense, keep in touch with people or at least keep track of what they're up to very easily. When I first got onto Facebook, I genuinely fretted about, well, would this mean that when I reconnected with people in person, the amount of, hey, what's up, how's life, tell me all your stories about new things going on, that would be muted or made unnecessary altogether? After all, that's most of the fun of a homecoming day or similar reunions. And as it turns out, shouldn't have worried. Social media has its pros and cons, and it definitely can keep me in the loop about new jobs and new kids and all that stuff. But there is genuinely nothing like seeing a face live or even on Zoom and hearing an actual voice that makes you realize how limited social media really is. Artificial intelligence will never, ever duplicate or replace the kind of voices, metaphorical or actual, that I have had the pleasure of knowing, and this week we will prove this. As much as we may talk about important band topics today, sorry everybody, my friend and I are just catching up here. Please help me welcome to the program Carol COX FORBES. Now, due to one thing and another and life careening off in directions, it's been a while since we last crossed paths in person. Actually, much more than that, I feel like.
16, maybe 17 years.
Whew.
That's the correct math. Sorry.
Wow. Seems like not quite that long ago. Thanks again to looking through the social media window. But our first interaction was at the old Drum Major Academy, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, and I still remember I remember being in your group at DMA up at UMass, right?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Details of which we will get to, absolutely. And I'm going to get out the way now and let you describe yourself via my standard kickstarting band questions. So as I usually do, I'll begin with, what's your primary instrument?
My primary instrument is clarinet. That's what I studied in college and played for a lot of high school.
How'd you get into playing?
My grandmother, she played piano for fun recreationally, and she sang in the choir at her church. And at home, she was always playing the piano. So we grew up, my family, on my dad's side, we would meet weekly on Sundays at my grandparents' house, and it probably at least 80% of the time she would play at some point. And I remember, like, crawling around the pedals and pushing them down and reaching up and trying to press the keys. What does this pedal do? That kind of thing. And she'd hold us while she was playing and sing to us and sing with us. And then my cousin, who's maybe 3 or 4 years older than me, he started playing violin, taking lessons, and his mother was a classically trained pianist. It's really fascinating. He was like a junior soloist as a teenager with the Reading Symphony Orchestra, and then as he studied at it's gonna escape me, conservatory in Ohio, I think. I can't remember the name of it.
Could it have been Oberlin?
Yes, I believe so.
Score.
Yes, I believe so. Thank you. I was like, I'm going to say this, and I can't remember. But now he facilitates Stradivarius sales. And so he's kind of a jet setter. And so there's like this kind of familial strain of music. And my cousins and I and my sister kind of followed in his footsteps to some degree, in that we would have like little mini recitals and play for the family. And so I actually started playing piano when I was like 6 or 7. That's been a really cool blessing. I started playing clarinet in 5th grade with my public elementary school. Continued playing clarinet in middle school, and in high school played piano with the jazz band, joined marching band, and then eventually got recruited over to low brass because we never have enough baritone players. So I played baritone, and then was able to be a drum major there. So I had like some some brass chops, and then went to college and chose clarinet as my primary instrument.
So I wonder if you've got a punch list of all the bands you've been active with in your life.
Not too many, actually. Of course, like where I grew up, my high school band, Old Mill High School, and then Towson University. During Towson, I did march for one season with the Crossmen playing baritone. And then after I graduated, I did stay active in a couple community bands like Bay Winds, and the Anne Arundel County Community College Band, which is a really fantastic. Like, I'm so lucky where I live. So I live in between Baltimore and Annapolis in Maryland, and there's just so much music everywhere, everywhere. And it's really cool. There's so many community bands and orchestras around here. It's really awesome. So I kind of like take it, I don't take it for granted. I'm very aware of it, but I definitely don't take advantage of it right now. I should give myself a little grace because I have a toddler. But
When you were with the Crossmen, was that, do I have that right? It was the year before they became a Texas Corps?
yes, I was the last East Coast group of crossmen. Yes. That's good memory.
I'm thinking 2006, but I could be wrong.
That was right. How is that in your brain? It's
There,
obscure,
there are times I can't find my car keys, but I can come up with that stuff. Not exactly a marketable skill.
but fascinating nonetheless.
Sure is, yeah. Now, we're doing this on Zoom, and this being an audio podcast, people cannot see this, but your eyes lit up a little bit when you talked about Towson University. Obliquely, that Towson thing is the reason we ever met at all. I may be getting ahead of us here, but your drum major work at Towson got you looped into the DMA Impact Team, the collegiate helper people. I have a very clear memory of my staff colleague, Michael Coogan, now a friend of the podcast, tapping me on the shoulder, pointing at you and saying, watch this one. And then you ended up assigned for at least a day to my afternoon conducting video room, which, for the uninitiated, is where we break down the video we shot that morning of DMA students conducting to recorded marches. Break down the video just like they do with football teams.
I remember that room with you. I remember.
Without question, I can picture the room and exactly where I was. And I looked over and said, Carol, you want to take this one? And it wasn't very long before I realized, oh, she's better than I am. Okay, so
No way.
Now, hold that drum major clinic thought because we're going to get back to that. I do ask people what's their current band-related role, and you've got one of those. You are, I think, the first elementary music teacher I've had on the podcast at a school somewhere in Maryland, yes?
That's in Anne Arundel County in Maryland. So we really are like the very northern tip of Anne Arundel County is in Baltimore City. Like the address is Baltimore. And then southern Anne Arundel County goes clear past Annapolis. It's a really interesting place to live. It has grown in population. It's very densely populated now. Everybody hates traffic here now. That's okay. Um, it's a really diverse population and also has the most, what's the word, waterfront property in the state of Maryland.
So how did you find your school district, or how did it find you?
When I graduated from Towson, I was hired mid-year for an elementary band and strings position. So in my district, the third graders are allowed to play a string instrument, violin, viola, cello, or bass. And then in fourth grade, they're allowed to choose from the string instruments or from a band instrument. Elementary school runs from pre-K or K to 5. And so I teach third through fifth graders, orchestra and band. When I first started, I took over for a long-term sub that was a retired strings teacher, and she was brilliant. She was a very effective teacher, and she let me shadow her for a couple days before, or maybe one day before I took over for her. And she bless her, she was ready to move up to Vermont because her house, their retirement house, was built and ready. And she scheduled the concerts for January for the new teacher to come in and do those concerts. They were a sight to behold.
Welcome in. Good luck.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. I'm just telling this because it's a really funny story. I started my job on January 2nd, and I walked the stage for my graduation on like January 8th or 7th or whatever, and then did my first concert for my job a week after that.
Might not be entirely fair to say they grabbed you by the collar and the belt loop and they threw you toward the pool and they said, here, learn to swim.
Uh-huh.
But wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone was okay. Everyone was okay. I think I only had to restart one song. It was fine.
Everybody should get one mulligan in their first gig. That's what I think.
Yeah. And then from there, so I was teaching at 3 schools once that long-term sub position turned into the job opening up. And I taught at 3 schools along Route 2, Ritchie Highway. One was in Northern Anne Arundel, addresses in Baltimore. One was in Glen Burnie, and one was down in Arnold. And as you travel, like from north to south on that highway, you go from a lower socioeconomic status with some traumatic stuff happening in the neighborhoods and in families. And then you move to like a more blue collar area, and then down to like the kind of Annapolis. If you've been to Annapolis, it's very much like you see yachts downtown Annapolis. Like it's a well-to-do kind of area. And so as you go south and you get to Annapolis and you get to that well-to-do area, and then you go south and then you hit rural Anne Arundel County, it's just farmland and cows and horses.
You taught all the tax brackets.
I taught all the tax brackets as a first year teacher in the district that I grew up in. And what was so fascinating about it is that I grew up in an upper middle class home, and I feel was kind of in a bubble most of my grade school undergraduate life. And it really opened up my eyes to see like this is stuff that's happening in my backyard, and I had no idea. Both the struggles that families were having in some areas of my district and the mind blowing experiences and supports that some of the other kids and communities have. That was really, I was listening to a little bit of your podcast with the dearest Michael Coogan, and he said that a kid is a kid is a kid. And it's so, so true. And that was when I really saw it, because my well-off kids could play. They were, can we play some Andrew Lloyd Webber? Can we play some Phantom of the Opera? And I'm like, who are you? You're in 4th grade. You're 9. But we did. Meanwhile, the other kids, I like can't get them to hold it the right direction, from week to week to week. And I'm trying to figure out how to motivate them and just get them playing.
Yeah.
And eventually, from seeing the kids where I was like, how can you do this? What did your teacher feed you before me? To the kids where it was like, were you in this class before me? Like, did they jump up in here?
And have you had breakfast today?
And have you had breakfast today? Yes. What are the significant losses you've experienced this week? And do you feel like playing hot cross buns? I don't know. So, but seeing what I'm holding up my hands for podcast, seeing what the well-off families, students could do and were capable of. I knew that these less well-off kids were capable of it. Were they going to get there as fast? No way. But I think seeing that glaring difference so early on made me very, very aware and very, very determined, in maybe an unhealthy way, to really try to figure out how to give those kids access to musical skills and musical experiences. And that hands down made me a lot of the teacher that I am now. So I spent like 9 years at the 2 schools in Glen Burnie and Northern Anne Arundel County. And I was able to drop the 3rd one, the one in Arnold, Maryland, so that I was only at 2 schools. It wore me down a little bit, and I eventually was like, I need to be at a 1 school situation. And that was very hard because I had invested a lot of time and love in those kids and families. It's a very difficult choice to make. But so now I'm at a 1 school position in a weird peninsula called Pasadena, and like everyone has been here forever. And again, another backyard neighborhood that I had no idea existed. When I grew up, I hadn't even heard of the school I'm at now, at Bodkin Elementary School, and it's a lovely place to teach. And I'm finally getting to the point where I'm starting to teach 2nd and 3rd siblings and see the older ones get up through high school, and it's really rewarding. So that is long story long. That's what my day job is. I really love it a lot.
So you spent time at Towson University, and again, that is how it came to be that we managed to connect because somebody, John Malowskis or someone of equivalent stature, looked around and said, "Get thee to a DMA impact team."
Yeah.
And to be very honest, I had heard of Towson State University. Most times, people who get in on the DMA Impact team, it's not exclusively so, but most times they're going to be drum majors of their college band, and you were going to be either going to be or already had been. How many years did you do that?
I was a junior drum major at my high school and then a senior drum major. So I got to go to DMA twice when I was in high school. And that was really super formative. As a kid who was really hungry for, I think, character guidance, leadership guidance, and like really having a sincere desire to do right by my peers that I was responsible for helping. That Westchester camp that I went to, for me, I feel was very life changing for me. It gave me, I think, language for things that I already knew, as well as like the drum major skill set, as well as the logistical and planning mindset, which comes and goes with me as a person who has adult diagnosed ADHD.
Oh,
So that was very formative. And then going to Towson, I auditioned for a drum major position and I earned one of the spots for a drum major position. And then the university decided that they were going to put more money into the marching band to enhance the football game experience at the university. And so they decided to open up the director position for hiring, and they ended up bringing in John Malowskis. So John Malowskis's first year at Towson was my first year as a sophomore drum major, and it was an experience.
talk a little bit about what that experience is like.
There's probably three things that very much made me into, maybe four if you count drum corps, because that's just insane to do in the first place and changes you because it's just so intense. But the three things that I think turn me into the person and the teacher that I am was the drum major academy when I was in high school, and then this whole drum major experience at Towson when John Malowskis got on board my freshman year. The morale was okay. We didn't have what I would say like a super polished product. Everybody had fun. It was a little bit old school. We did a lot of arm circles and some push ups in there, I think, maybe. It was a very like kind of old school, smallish kind of band. And when John Malausis came in, and of course he had worked with George Parks and had been a drum major with him, and it had, had that culture building background. He was like, no, we're going to recruit more kids. We're going to get more and better equipment. We're going to get new uniforms. We're going to do a more DCI leaning product that still is appealing to pop audiences.
He was with the cadets in some fashion, was he not?
He marched cadets, yes. And I'm sure worked with cadets later. I'm not clear on that. He was the program coordinator when I marched. So he helped develop that radio show for the Crossmen. And so I was very lucky and honored to be one of the drum majors at Towson my sophomore, my junior, and my senior year. And it was really invaluable to see how John Malowskis changed that culture into what it is today. It was, how do I describe it? I think when I was a freshman, there was very much the feeling that we all had pride in what we did, but we all knew it could probably be better. It wasn't the best product that we could put out. And there were a lot of struggles in rehearsals with the quality of music and learning that was happening. And I feel like John Malowskis brought all those things with him. And most importantly, he really engaged with the current student leaders, which he endearingly, we ended up calling ourselves SMAC, Student Marching Arts Council. Um, and so He would have us meet and then talk about what do we want our rehearsals to look like? What do we want our football days to look like? How do we make that happen? How do we, start to put in structures for logistical problems? That was the second really formative experience I had on top of being at those different schools at the beginning of my career that I really loved them so much, and really cool experiences that opened my eyes to how to influence others in a positive way
Mm-hmm.
and as many people as possible.
My understanding is that you hung around Towson and assisted there after graduating, in addition to the new gig.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I was invited by Malauskis to come back and help run some leadership and conducting workshops with the Towson Band, and also work with the drum majors as a drum major coach. He had brought on board Joe Beitman when I was in college, and he was one of the drum majors of the Blue Coats. He came and would attend rehearsals and help me with my conducting technique, like give me one on one feedback, which was really, really awesome. But as far as teaching what I knew from my conducting experience and my drum major experience, all I had to go on was DMA and that one or two seasons where Joe came in and helped me with my conducting pattern. And so it very much was okay, start with what I know. And the Towson tradition, just kind of by default, because of where we are in Maryland and that Westchester DMA influence, and John Malauskis ended up being a very George Parks style, kind of like Delaware and UMass. It was a lot of using what I'd learned from the impact team and that to help teach the next couple classes of Towson Tiger marching band kids about leadership, and then eventually learning to teach myself the visual skills of like identifying pattern and technique differences and trying to make it's just like visual marching band, it's just with hands, but trying to identify those myself and try to make the kids look the same when they're conducting.
And my careful analysis of your bio on the Towson Band website suggests that you've since taken that micro drum major clinicking on the road.
I've been invited to a high school down in North Carolina and a university down in North Carolina, a couple universities in Maryland, and then some high school programs. The longest I was able to work with a program is with the Urbana high school kids. They've done a couple different circuits. They've done BOA and they've done US bands, and they're doing there's a Maryland marching band circuit now that's run by the directors, the Maryland Band Directors Association. Through working with those programs, I've been able to go out and visit like very infrequently some other programs and just drop in. People call me and say it's kind of a drum major emergency. I go, okay, tell me what you got. I'll see what I can do. I'll see what I can do. I think the last little leg of that that's been really, really cool is Towson started a high school marching arts camp in the summer. It's like a 4 day kind of overnight camp. High schoolers are invited, and we split up into winds, percussion, drum major, and color guard. And we put together a show at the end of the week. We rehearse together, but we also break off and do sectionals. And so there's a drum major leadership track that I've been involved with probably 12-ish years. And it's always been former drum majors that come and run that, which has been really very cool to work with kids that were in the same program as me and in the same position. And there's like definitely a weird kinship bond with people that I've literally never met. So the high school camp is really neat because I get to meet all these kids from around the state. And then I go, I'm a program, nope, wrong word, show coordinator for the Maryland Marching Band Association. So I'll go to the shows and just help with like show flow and any kind of logistic on the fly things that happen. If there's rain, like just helping. I'm not necessarily making the calls, but I am like assisting with those decisions and helping to facilitate the communication with that stuff. Or if a band's running late, do we push the show 15 minutes? Do we stick them in somewhere else? That kind of thing. But I get to see all the directors and all their kids that went to the summer camp. And it's really cool. It's really cool to see in that circuit that's only a couple years old. It's cool to see the connections that are being made between the kids and the programs, the relationships that I think we're always kind of there, but very tenuous or hit or miss.
Sounds like here's a very specific place where that sort of thing can be fostered, or at the very least, here's the stew and here's the lightning bolt.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Now, two questions occurred to me when you said drum major emergency. One of those questions is, when you have gone to work with or on a drum major emergency, does everybody know it's a drum major emergency?
No, they are very few and far between, I will say, happily. Usually, if it's an emergency, it usually has to do with like auditions. Like, I've been brought in to help judge auditions for drum major leadership or interviews, as well as like if there's not a need for like extensive conducting training, but they really just need like some kind of crash course to look like they kind of look the same. Like somebody just has some weird tendencies and we need them to look like a little bit closer, like really fast. They call me
She's the pattern whisperer. The other
me. I don't
question,
know. My God.
the other question that occurred to me, regardless of whether it's a drum major emergency or not, when you go to work with drum majors, how public is that? Like, is it in the middle of a rehearsal?
I try to make it a combination if I can. So like some kind of sectional time that I get with the kids, just them and me, because you're in such a weird in between place. You're supposed to be this person that is semi in charge of your peers while also being a peer, which is in and of itself a really tricky line to walk. And then also, you don't really get to call a lot of the shots, and you have to go along with the decisions that your band director makes in order for things to overall go smoothly. You don't have to agree with it, but like you have to come to terms with that somehow and stay true to yourself while also trying to serve in the position. And so like sometimes those tricky feelings and circumstances that they're trying to navigate will come out because sometimes it's the social dynamics that are challenging,
Mm-hmm.
and personalities, which is it's hard and trying to honor and validate everyone's experience while also saying, okay, with all that in mind, what's going to get us to the greater good? How can we move forward and really do what we're all here to do? We can't do it without each other.
And as that's happening, the addressing of whatever technical or social challenge is the thing that's causing the stress or trouble, you get to navigate the psychology of people at any age, but especially adolescence, which famously is a time in which nobody wants to be publicly seen as not competent. So your job is fixing things without making it look like you're fixing things,
Yes. Yeah. So, okay,
or
I think I
without
understand
making it
what you're saying.
obvious to people, you know?
So yeah, so like the sectional stuff, like we definitely, it's a very more real and authentic conversation, like very direct, very vulnerable and open kind of thing. And then trying to give them whatever one or two tools I can give them with conducting or commands or tempo training, whatever I think is going to give them the most bang for their buck and help them look the most competent in front of their peers. And that's what we work on when we leave that sectional and we go to rehearsal. So usually it's with an ensemble block following that, ideally. And I can kind of like sit down on the ground so that I'm not in front of them and I'm literally whispering things to them. Their first times up on a podium, if there's not an older drum major that can be there with them, which I'll tell them, I'm like, when they go up, this person's down next to them and they're just going to feed you the words because it's so true. Your first time up there, you don't know what to say. You think you do.
Your brain clears out.
Yes, it does. Start thought. So literally just trying to get over the nerves of being up in front of them and then trying to give them as immediate feedback as possible without gunking up the rehearsal momentum.
And the thing that allows you to be effective in that, I would think, is your 5 years worth of experience in that very role that they are filling out as well. In the context of, I've been there. You got to figure out how to work in the context of, oh, a new band director, and oh, applying new ideas and new philosophies to a band that thought it was pretty happy where it was. You've navigated a lot of those same waters, and that gives you field cred.
Part of what I accidentally left out is, along with that drum major DMA experience in high school, was my senior year. You know, it's senior drum major, this is gonna be great. I just went to Westchester, I'm ready. We got the show music. It's not the hook show like I thought it would be. It's the American Pride one because of 9/11 the year before. And we might have made it to September. So we'd already done early week and school had already started. And our band at that time in my high school at Old Mill, the middle school director, my middle school director had retired, and someone else had gotten the position and was an orchestra guy and didn't meet our kids' needs or the program's needs. We lost a lot of feeder power support through like kid performance, and like the freshmen that we got that year were great humans, but behind where you would expect a freshman to be musically. And kind of in the 11th hour, my director decided that he was going to pull us from competition, that we wouldn't compete for the season.
Ooh.
It was very dramatic, Rob. It was very dramatic. All the seniors wanted to quit. I didn't like the decision, but I knew I had to do it because Start thought you do what the band director says. I just don't, and I remember going into Bill Selway's office and saying, like, there's no way we can compete. Like, can we? Like, all of us want to. Like, why can't we? Even if we come in last place. And he said, Carol, you've never been in a program where you come in last place every single time. He goes, I'm not putting you guys through that. Like, that is the final decision. But then he said something very important to me that I will never forget. You can tell the other kids how you feel. It's okay for you to say that to them. And I was like, what? I said, well, can I meet with them like after school? Can we just have like a student meeting? And I took them through the George Parks, the close your eyes, think of your senior. And they opened their eyes and I said, this is about more than competition. This is about the people that we spend time with, getting ready for those things. There's still things to get ready for. There's still us together. And I said, you can, I get it. If you want to quit, I'm not going to, because this is what it's about for me. I want to be here with you. And I hope you guys see that too. And then we only ended up, it was a miracle. It was a miracle. We only ended up losing like 2 members a couple weeks later because they were just really focused on the product. Everybody has different motivations being in band, and that was theirs. But like, for a little short stacked 48 member band, we held our own, and that was the first time where I really had to make a choice about how this is a really crummy situation, and how am I going to walk this? How am I going to navigate this? That experience, while it was so disappointing to not get to do the competitions that like the seniors had done before me, and to have that excitement about going to the shows and being in the shows and going out in retreat and things, like I didn't get to do that. Like, there was a lot of personal disappointment, but I chose not to focus on it. And I chose to do it anyway, the best that I could. And the relationships that I built were so rich from that. So I do share that with drum majors and leaders that I work with that have a new band director coming in, or they have some kind of major disappointment. During COVID, I put it out there on social media, I think, maybe in an email, and I said to directors, I said, hey, I've gone through some major disappointments in marching band as a leader, and truthfully, I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't change a thing because through that disappointment, I learned to appreciate what I really did have right in front of me. And when I did get to be in front of that Towson University marching band, it was the sweetest thing to be able to savor that and be in front of such a cool group, and to also invest in them the same respect and care that I tried to do for my peers in high school, and get both of those experiences at the same time. And so being able to share that perspective for kids that are like on the cusp of it, like looking down the barrel of like, ooh, this could be a crappy season. And I go, no, no, no. Yes, some of it's crappy. but, but, and it's a big but, there are lots of moments that are beautiful and full of love, and you will miss them. You will miss them if all you're looking for is the thing that you're missing. So you have to keep your eyes open and catch those moments.
Well, this is one of those conversations that could and should go on and on and on, but that's what follow up conversations are for, after all. Start part two. So, to bring us back into port, let me hit you as we wrap up a little bit here with some of my slightly less strictly resume based questions. What's one of your favorite pieces of band music that you've played, either outdoors or indoors?
Resting in the Peace of His Hands. I forgot to look up the composer of that. Ooh, I don't even know how old it is. I played it in high school, but it sounded older than than the 2000s. It's just a really beautiful piece of music, and I believe it's based on a piece of art. It's so peaceful. It's very beautiful. I had the opportunity to play it in like our district band as a kid, and then in our high school program. I just really, it's a very peaceful piece of music. I can't come up with another word.
Is there a piece of band music that you've never played but you would like to?
Yes. So, one of my odd things that I do is I will chaperone the All-State Junior Band, and they rehearse in a hotel and stay overnight. So it's like this kind of mini camp experience for our All-State kids. And the junior band is for kids in grades 7 through 9. It's incredible. They like play their faces off, and then they call a water break, and they're like these awkward, lanky middle schoolers again for about 7 minutes, and then they go back and sit down, and then they're these monster players. So I got to hear them play under the direction of Rich Roberts, Until the Scars, and it's an adaptation from Hubris from Wine Dark Sea Symphony for Band, John Mackey. It was so much fun to listen to. And like the kid, you could tell the kids really enjoyed it. Like, when there's that like extra like buzz of energy when the ensemble really enjoys playing it, it was like that piece for me, and I think for some of the kids in the program.
Is there a band that you would love to perform with that you have never performed with, either because you're not the right age or you're not in the right location or don't live in the right time?
I would always love to play in the Towson University Marching Band again. That's like my home.
I am right with you.
Yeah. Like even with kids that I don't know, like they do their show now, and I'm like tearing up watching them because I see I see my friends when I look at the kids that I haven't met, and how they're like connecting with each other musically and dancing, and like that that vibe, that energy. Like I look at them and it brings me right back, and I'm like with those special people that I got to spend so much time with in college.
Well, it has been such a blast to be able to catch up with you and introduce you to the BandWagon podcast listenership who needed to know who you were.
You're very kind. It's been really, really good catching up with you, Rob.
Likewise, for sure. Music educator, rescuer of drum majors, and one of the nicest people on the face of planet Earth, and I am not exaggerating, Carol COX FORBES. Thanks for jumping onto the pod.
Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you.
And on the other side of this brief breath mark, more BandWagon. Here comes the dogfight. This week's dogfight is a brief tale, which floated back to the top of my mind after my trio section conversation with Carol. It's from my time as a drum major with the Minuteman Marching Band, a time that I would trade for nothing in the whole world, in part because, well, yeah, drum major, and also in part because I got to share that drum major experience with some random person called Heidi Sarver, who went on to be a leading light in the band world, but who, even toward the beginning of her career, was a force to be reckoned with. So I would remember lots of details from that 1987 fall marching season anyway. Lots of them are seared into my brain, but other details that might otherwise have gotten away didn't get away because I kept notes. I kept a tattered green notebook handy and scribbled into it lots of longhand observations, not only about marching band operations, but also more social or personalized events and impressions. A couple of years after I graduated from UMass, I took those notes and expanded them into actual prose. Yes, I was a band geek and a journalism geek. So this story was written down, along with some other ones, just as soon as I got back to my dorm after the second home football game day of the 1987 season, while the details were still fresh in my mind. So here goes. A tale of, drum major emergency. For pregame of home game number 2 against James Madison University, Heidi led the UMass battery into McGurk Alumni Stadium. She said she wanted to work out some whistle commands with them. Therefore, I and my other drum major colleague, Chris Gardner, led the rest of the band through a different stadium gate and onto the back sideline. After the pregame show was complete, the cadence fired up, and the brass, winds, and color guard marched over to one of the other stadium gates to make a tunnel for the football team to enter through. And there I was, marching calm as you please toward the gate along with the band, feeling pretty good about myself, when our fine director, George Parks, addressed me hissingly. Rob, get the drums. Oh, oops. My error, or at least I certainly took credit for it, was this. I failed to step in front of the battery to signal to them that it was time for them to move toward the gate too. I knew why that was. Nothing to do with Heidi's whistle commands at all, but rather, I was pretty sure that our center snare drummer had been taking care of commanding the battery. Pretty sure. So I tore back over to the 50-yard line, where the drums had been dutifully cranking out the cadence, and somehow communicated to them that they should now crab along the sideline, 8 steps off, all the way over to the stadium gate beyond the end zone, and kind of do it quickly, please. And they did, just in time for the football team to have already entered the stadium, and in fact all those players were on the sideline near the 50-yard line, stretching and psyching themselves up for the game. Drat. The band, all of it, winds, flags, drums, drum majors, marched to a snare tap out the stadium gate and around behind the press box side grandstand, the better to then bail out of the marching block and head up toward our game time location, the fabled Section 8. After having the band fall out, though, Mr. Parks called a drum major powwow, waving away some band folks who had questions for him. He looked at the three of us, took a deep inhale, and said, "We have to start thinking now," as well as some other comments that did appear to be accompanied by gouts of flame. I could see my 6'2" drum major friend Chris shrinking to about 5'4", and much as I tried to keep it expressionless, my face probably screamed, my fault, my stinking fault." But I was at least smart enough not to interrupt Mr. Parks. He was on a roll. To his drum major's relief, Mr. Parks added, "Now, if that's all we have to fix, we're in great shape." Still, we were properly chastised. I'm still not sure that the whole band had embarrassed itself, as he had claimed, only if the audience knew exactly what pregame was supposed to look like, or cared. But after Mr. Parks trotted away to join the rest of the band in the stands, Heidi just looked at Chris and me, and with an air of utter nonchalance, as if she knew something we didn't, which was true, she said to us, we got 2 hours on a bus to Boston Tuesday. We'll figure it out. And she wandered up into the stands. Chris seemed particularly grateful for Heidi's impressive cool and tone of voice that said, "No sweat." He and I exchanged a glance that probably translated as, "My God, we're not dead," and we headed up to Section 8 ourselves. Drum major emergency indeed. Okay, one last media timeout, and then we'll wrap things up for this week. Thanks for continuing to listen. To wrap up this week, let's take the CODA. For the CODA this week, a joke. A group of vacationers are on safari in the deep, dark wilderness. They gradually become aware of a rumble of drums from somewhere off in the distance. Noticing their worried expressions, their seasoned guide tells them, "Do not worry, it is only bad when the drums stop." Venturing further into the dense forest, their sense of foreboding returns as the ominous pounding grows louder and louder. Again, their guide reassures them, it is only bad when the drums stop. They press on. As they round the bend and come to the base of a great mountain, the drums, much closer now, rise to a tremendous crescendo, and then abruptly stop. The guide suddenly looks terrified. "Oh no," he whispers. What? What?" the vacationers cried out. The guide whimpers. "Trombone solo." That's BandWagon for this week. Thanks as always for downloading and listening. Sorry about that. BandWagon was written, researched, and produced by your humble host. Musical interludes were produced by Hammerton Media, from source material largely by John Philip Sousa. You can listen to more episodes at the pod's website, heyband.podbean.com. Please give me feedback. Let me know what you like or what you think might change. You can do that using the email address heybandwagon@yahoo.com, or leave a 90-second voice message by going to speakpipe.com/heybandwagon. Be aware that I do reserve the right to include your message on the podcast unless you say otherwise. Those contact links and links to this week's news items, conversation topics, and my interview guest, Carol COX FORBES, can be found in our show notes, as can a link to BandWagon's merch store, thanks to the good folks at TeePublic. Please share the show on social media, and thank you for that. If you enjoy this podcast, please do share it in the direction of someone whom you think might not be a listener yet. Word of mouth really is the best recruiting tool. And to keep up with the pod every week, subscribe to BandWagon on the Podbean app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever fine podcasts are sold. For now, take care, stay in touch, stay in tune, and we'll do this all again next week. I'm Rob Hammerton, and remember, don't spin your mace over asphalt. Trust me.